Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Welcome to Yippee-Ki-Yay Classic. Hi, everybody. How's it going? The group.
Great,
Hello.
You know what? Go ahead. Give your names. Go ahead. Do your names. You guys want to do your names? Start with Sean. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sean Paul Murphy.
I'm Debbie.
That's Wojo laughing like a hyena.
I'm Michelle
Brad.
Wojo.
I'm John.
with her.
It's Brad Barrow. He's going to edit this all out now.
Right. Who we got to talk? John, introduce yourself.
I've introduced myself already. I'm John.
Okay.
Oh, you're John. I'm
Drew,
John.
introduce
I'm
yourself,
John.
Drew.
Well, you just gave it away. Drew, introduce yourself. Hi, Drew. You guys already know. Way to spoil it.
You guys, I'm cutting this right out. Just so
And
you
our
know.
special
Please
guest.
do.
We have a
Please do.
special guest. Sean, introduce our guest, please.
Is that the actual start of the show?
We're going to launch right in. But first thing, Sean,
all
what's
over
the
the place.
movie? What's the movie you brought to the table? Then you can introduce your guest.
Hi, I'm Sean. And this week I brought one of my favorite films of all time, A Hard Day's Night, to the table. And, you know, never knowing how people are going to react to a black and white film, I had to bring a special guest, an old friend of mine from high school, Mike Lane, you know, Archbishop Curley, high school, class
Nice.
of 79.
I went to Curly.
There's another reason why I brought Mike. And I'll tell you why. And this is no bullshit. Mike Lane literally saved my life with rock and roll with a little help from the Beatles. Can I have a moment to explain? Look at Mike. He's like that.
I mean, you left.
Can we
You
say
leave
hi
us
to Mike
hanging with
first?
that one.
Hi,
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah, he
Welcome
was
to the
hanging
show.
now.
Okay, so
Hi.
here's what happened. Mike and I were friends in high school, lost track of them in college. And near the end of my college experience, I broke up with my longtime girlfriend, and I was literally in a suicidal downward spiral. I mean, literally suicidal. And one day I'm leaving the film lab at Towson, and Mike is standing below at the door to the radio station. I'm like, Mike, what the hell are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm here with Ed Neenan. Our band is recording at the radio station. And I'm like, and Ed was in my class, and Ed was telling me he was in this band. I didn't know Mike was in it. So I thought that was really cool, typical Baltimore. But then there was a party that weekend. And by another friend of mine, Tom Brandow, at his apartment. And I didn't realize that Tom also knew Mike, that they were like best friends since like grade school or something. So I go to this party. I never went to parties because I was always worked, and I was never. So I go to this party, depressed as a dog. And near the end of the night, Mike and Ed Neenan, another friend of mine, took out their acoustic guitars and started playing Beatles songs. And then something amazing happened. Every girl in the party gathered around them in awe, and that's what struck me with awe. I'm like, oh my God, look at this. Every girl in the place is gathering around them. True, Mike?
It happened.
Okay.
He's not denying. No denial there.
And, the music, I didn't, I knew Mike played the guitar and all, and I never saw Ed, but they were doing such a great job singing these songs too. But the girls were more impressive. And they had a show that Wednesday at a place behind a nightclub behind where Gordon Miller's Music was. And it was a Wednesday night. There was no crowd there. So I went to, this is the first time I ever went to see a band at a bar. And I went there and there was no one there. And I watched their set when they were amazing. The band was called The Click. Afterwards, Mike came over to the bar to talk to me. And I pulled him aside and I said, Mike, this is amazing. Is it true that anybody who can play the guitar can get any girl at any time? To which Mike said, look at me, I'm alone now. But still, literally, he inspired me to start playing the guitar, which I became somewhat obsessive with. And that really put my mind in a different place. And then as soon as I knew 3 chords, I started writing songs. And I say that year of writing songs was my therapy session that got me back on the road to recovery. And once I had 4 songs, once I knew 4 chords, I was starting a band. So I do have to credit always Mr. Mike Lane for saving my life through rock and roll with a little help from the Beatles. So that's why I invited Mike to watch this movie was.
Mike, thanks for saving Sean. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolute pleasure.
And
I
also,
have told my
Mike is
boys-
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
He's such a tremendous Beatles fan that when I would see like his band, the Rockheads, at the Marble Bar, they'd play something like "I Saw Her Standing There," but he wouldn't play it like the record. He would like do George's solo from the Swedish concert. And he'd come off stage and go, "Hey, did you notice what I did?" Yeah, sweet. So he really knew. And back then, before Anthology, you had to get deep into the bootlegs to know all of that stuff. So
That's a nice
awesome.
story and an inspirational story that hopefully will get people to subscribe to our channel and maybe share that
So
story.
shameless.
Mike, you could increase our subscriptions
By 3 at least.
by maybe 3.
Yeah.
Hopefully by you at least.
Well, having said that, nice story, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll get through the emotion of that. Well, here's the film.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Sean, let us have it. You got any research on this baby or what?
yes, this is one of my favorite films. I think it's an incredibly joyful film. If you love the Beatles, you're going to love this film. And in addition to being a great and entertaining film, it's also very influential in its mock documentary approach, its editing, its handheld camera. This is all stuff that's very common today, but and not that this invented any of that, but it really put together a package that would help define modern cinema, particularly like videos and things like this. This was a tremendous film, and its history is it was released by United Artists. United Artists didn't give a damn about this movie because they had discovered that there was a clause in the Beatles contract that, Parlophone, Capitol, EMI owned everything except movie soundtracks. They didn't have movie soundtracks in there. So United Artists just wanted to make a movie, any movie, so that they could get a Beatles album. So they were planning to make money on the album. They viewed the movie as a loss leader. They had no anticipation that it was going to be good. It was done quickly on a really low budget. They were very wise in that they got Richard Lester, who was established in some weird comedy sort of way, but not like an established feature director. And they got Alan Olin, a Liverpool writer who spent some time with them, to gauge their personalities and wrote the script. And so, he's also, he's written a ton of stuff, but this is his main piece. Director Richard Lester became one of the most successful directors of the 60s and in the 70s. I believed he was the highest paid director in the world for a long period. So this film influenced a lot of what happened afterwards. I was reading Roger Ebert's review, and, he gave it a 4-star thing. And he said, it's hard to imagine the impact that this film had on the audiences at the time. He goes, many young men walked into this movie with short hair and didn't cut it again until the 70s. So it was a huge cultural milestone, and it's a great glimpse into like the most exclusive club in the world. The 4 people in the Beatles. They were much idolized. In Beatle lore, you're a first or third generation. I guess I'm kind of a first generation fan because I do remember the music when it first came out, the late singles. I was cognizant of the stuff being released, but this was a fantastic movie. I love it. I will watch it many times before I die, unless I die tonight.
Let me ask.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Well, maybe Mike can save you again then.
I'm here.
Now, you guys said you graduated in 79, right?
Yes.
Both of you. That's when I graduated. So our memory
That's
of the
why
Beatles-
you're Gen X and
Right.
Mike and I are baby boomers.
Yeah, I don't know how
not
that
Gen
happened,
X.
but that's
It's
definitely
Not
happened.
Gen
It's true.
X.
I know. Maybe. So, I mean, my memory of the Beatles is kind of like yours because I obviously. Okay, one question: when did they hit Ed Sullivan? Was that 63 or
64,
60?
February of 64.
So this movie came out in 64.
July of
after-
64.
So after that,
July.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The movie July. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Ed
movie
Sullivan.
came out in July. They were when were they on Ed Sullivan?
February of
Okay.
64.
February.
So this had to have been. You think about young people with their bands and stuff. To see this film, to go and actually see this film, it had to have been mind blowing. to be that close to. I mean, you're like sitting in the room with these guys. It's very personal. I know the writer followed them to kind of get their quirks and really enhance it in the film, I guess. And I think John has 2 pages of info. I'm sure Mike has a lot to say about the making and all that, and what this actually the significance this film had on the band itself in America, and how people perceive the Beatles. I mean, I'd like to hear some of that, because my memory of the Beatles is kind of delayed, right? So to me, as I was getting older, teenager, you kind of knew about them, but it wasn't the significance that it would have had on teenagers that saw this film or were teenagers at the time. I mean, we knew they were good, but it wasn't the cultural phenomenon that I didn't.
Are you saying you really rediscovered them with the Red and Blue albums?
I guess I really don't know when I did. I'm not a big music guy, so it's hard for me. But as I got older, definitely I got all the collections. I got all the records and CDs and stuff. And like I said, that Yesterday movie really makes you feel like how shitty the world would have been if the Beatles were never around. Because their music is just everywhere, and it's that impactful. So now, as far as the film, it's cute. I liked it. I like seeing the personalities. I like seeing what they were doing. Richard Lester definitely was ahead of his time with some of the angles they did, all that stuff in that field that they shot. And movies like That Thing You Do just copied what they did in this film to sort of shadow what was going on. Anyway, I don't want to talk. I want people who know about the film. Mike, we brought Mike on for a reason. Mike, give us something about the film that why you became such a Beatlemaniac, I guess. Is this part of it, or?
Absolutely. Like you say, it's a great glimpse into their lifestyle and their personality. They come across as fairly natural, I think, in the film, and having their dialogue written by Alan Owen, who had followed them around, it helped them a lot. They later felt like it pigeonholed them into the stereotype that they became known for. I don't quite see it that way, but that's how they kind of felt about it. But like Sean said, it's a very joyous, great spirit to the film, and very British. By the time the film came out, other bands had started infiltrating the American charts, so everything British was great. But I was struck last night, I did watch it last night, just how British it was. There was no pandering to an American audience. There's so much British slang. I'm still trying to figure out some of what it means after all this time and having seen the film dozens of times. It's still a great, enjoyable film, and the music is great. I did watch the Miramax DVD that came out a while back, which was hideously rechanneled for some sort of 5.1 stereo, and they didn't have access to any master tape. So they took, I guess, the optical sound and tried to make a mono into 5.1 or something, and it's hideous. It's just an abomination. It should not be. So seeing that trailer for the Janus version or whatever, I've got to update my copy, because it sounds a million times better.
Can I say one thing, Mike? When I went to the theater when they re-released Yellow Submarine, not my favorite Beatles movie, but they had a true 5.1 mix.
Yes.
And I tell you what, it was like hearing that music for the first time.
Agreed.
That was wonderful. This, I had the same terrible Miramax one too. Well, I have to watch the movie, so even a crappy one. But the new Blu-ray is great. Ralph, do you have this one on Laserdisc?
I do not. Like I said, I'm not. I wasn't a huge Beatles fan as a kid, and the movies didn't really I knew this was sort of promotional for the record company. I've never seen I think I've seen Yellow Submarine. I don't really remember. And the other one is Help, I think.
Yeah. And don't forget Magical Mystery Tour.
Right. When is your first memory of the Beatles though? I mean, you're telling me we're the same age. And what was your first song that you were, what was the first thing that you remember about the Beatles? Mike and Sean or anybody jump in.
I remember hearing We Can Work It Out on the radio. I think that would probably be the earliest. And the first album I ever bought was the VJ Introducing the Beatles, which is sort of a 12-track version of the Beatles' first British album. So, and this was after it was out. I'll tell you, I know what year I bought that album. because I bought With the Beatles, and I was listening on the stereo, and my brother got from my uncle the White Album, the Beatles White Album, and he was listening to that on cassette, and literally I did not even know it was the same band. I did not know it was the same band. So that shows you. And I do remember like Come Together and Something, and definitely all the later singles. But I think the earliest Beatles song I remember playing contemporaneously was We Can Work It Out.
Now, John, you have 2 pages of notes.
Yeah, but I want to know, I know Drew hadn't seen this. Wojo or Brad, have you seen this before?
No.
I'd like to hear what they say before I get into my stuff.
Oh, I don't think
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So obviously I'm a Beatles fan. I now, of course, I don't have a memory of them as they were when they were around, because I was born in 1968. So they were pretty much done by the time I was speaking. So I mean, I do remember them obviously early as a kid, and heard a lot of the songs because they were still, it's probably early mid 70s when I was, starting to listen to music a little bit. Obviously, I mean, I don't really specifically remember where. I don't have a ton of great memories of when I was a kid, but I know I must have been hearing it all the time because when I was pretty young, I knew a ton of their songs, But yeah, so no, I had never seen this movie. It was a lighthearted movie. It was fun in some ways, but and I get it, and the music was great. But I think the music is what kept it going. And I understand the purpose of the movie, which was kind of more promotional. I'm sure it was kind of capitalizing on their peak. I think I'm sure this is kind of the main purpose of the movie, because I have to believe that was the main purpose of the movie, because the movie as a movie, I felt was crap. It was kind of stupid. It was silly. But I understand you were seeing their personalities. I get the purpose of the movie. I think you were really seeing their personalities and their silliness, and they were kind of, carefree and that kind of. They were a new generation, and they were kind of,
Well, and some of the things we talked about, the goofiness that they did led to the Monkees.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that TV show became very goofy and silly and that kind of stuff. I understand why this movie was revolutionary. I caught, we were joking about, I guess they got the helicopter for one day, and I'm sure those shots were amazing when they came out, and the handheld stuff I'm sure was amazing. And I'm sure a lot of girls went to see this because this was the predecessor to the video, to like rock videos. What did I think about it as a movie? I didn't like it. I mean, I liked the Beatles, but as a movie, Mike, could you bring Sean back from the dead again?
Heel.
I love the Beatles, and I actually remember when I got my first Beatles albums, and I got the greatest hits, the red and the blue, and my mom bought me the albums from the long defunct Two Guys department store.
Oh yeah, that's where I got them too.
And I got her to get me Wings. It was a live album, and they said the F word. My mom didn't know it, and I was very happy as like a 6th grader or something. Oh, my mother doesn't know. So I listened to, I wrote a book report, on the Beatles. We had to like read a magazine and talk about it. So I got a magazine about the Beatles. I really like the Beatles. I really like their work. I did not love this movie. I'm glad I saw it. Brad and I talked a lot about how there were definitely things that made it revolutionary, but there was no plot. I mean, it was it for what it was. It
Like
was great at what it was.
I don't know that they were trying to make a great movie. I think they were just trying to promote the Beatles. I really think that's the main purpose of that.
Well, it was a mockumentary, like
Just coming
Spinal Tap,
in-
one day.
Well, the music company didn't expect us to make any money, and they were
Right.
it was a loss leader for the album. So, all right. Well, Drew, had you seen this?
The movie make.
It was a
It
hit.
was big.
Yeah, I don't
It was
know.
huge.
No, I'm sure it was.
Oh, yeah. Well, you said it was on after Ed Sullivan, right? Or it came out after Ed
It came
Sullivan.
out July
So I'm
after
By
Sullivan.
then, they were
Yeah.
really, kind of skyrocketing.
Well, and those
Yeah.
were real kids chasing them in all those scenes.
Well, no,
No, I'm sure.
the scene when they first get on the train was actually they were about to shoot the first scene in the train. So Lester grabbed the handheld and said, let's just get him. Because those weren't extras. Those were real people running him into the train. That wasn't part of the script. That He just filmed it and just kept it in. So
right,
they were
Drew,
running for their lives.
Had you seen this before?
I had not seen this before. Since we're just throwing out information to have our identity stolen, I was born in 1976. So I grew up in a world
70s.
where John was already dead. And of course the Beatles were long gone. And the best music that they created ultimately obviously was Yoko Ono's solo work. But I think it's funny, this movie. I mean, I grew up in America and on Earth. So I've heard the Beatles and they're extraordinary. I mean,
What's
just
your mom's
watching the movie.
name, Drew? No, I'm kidding.
My my experience with the Beatles is that I mean it's infectious pop fun music. I love it. I wasn't interested in who they were as people as much as the people who saw this movie when it came out would have been. And I found this movie is one of those movies. I was bored watching it, but it's also extraordinary. And I get that it's extraordinary. And I tried to put myself in the position of what it would have been like to watch it. Because there are certain movies that just change the medium that aren't necessarily a movie that I would like Birth of a Nation is an extraordinary movie. Its message is hooray, the Klan. So we can't get behind it. And this is a movie that it changed so much of what a movie could do, of what the relationship between a fan or the fans and the musicians and all the stuff that then it influenced, I mean, my entire lifetime, all the stuff that you see, the casual nature of it and the way that it looks like it's a documentary and the way that it looks like you're really just following them around. I mean, Richard Lester, just the way he tells the story is amazing. I personally wasn't interested in the story, but I think it's an extraordinary movie and it's an important movie. And also, I mean, it's fun to hear the music because the music is great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Debbie.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I love the.
We need some Debbie delights. Let's go.
I love the Beatles. I love the harmonies, and I've always wondered about who was singing what parts. Mike, you probably know from your ear. You and your wife have got beautiful sound. That harmony kind of knowledge, and I've always tried. So that's why I feel the same way about the movie. Sorry to say, it is kind of to me. The guys, they're kind of the Beatles are in that movie. Now that movie, Hard Day's Night, was kind of. I saw it when I was 9, and that's.
Oh, is this like Spitfire Grill? So did you like it when you were 9? And then what do you think now?
I remember I was a kid when I was 9. A child. I was a real child. I just started to go to movies and, that weren't cartoons. And I think when I saw it, I said, well, this is very different. And I remember as a child thinking, this isn't like a movie. You know what I mean? As I remember how I felt about seeing the movie. And it kind of tried to follow it, but there was no follow. It was those guys, they were just sort of being glib. I thought. I didn't know that I didn't use the term glib when I was a child, but some of the language.
What term did you use?
What?
No, just kidding.
I was like, what? Yeah. I didn't understand it being a child, but now to watch it, we just watched it and it was fun to see who was singing what. And that is always.
Yeah. But yeah. I'm trying to think. Did they really show that, or they just?
Oh yeah, they show all of that.
So if George is singing, if we're seeing him on camera singing, that's his voice in the song.
Yeah, well, I tell you, well, one thing I was getting on Debbie's last nerve while we were watching this.
No, really?
Because
wow, she's very patient.
Different things every time I watched this movie, and I was trying to concentrate on the movie at whole, but mainly what I was watching was how they were playing the guitars. So, like during I Should Have Known Better, I started giving out the chords as I saw them. And I went C, and she goes, C what? I go to C chord, D.
You should have known better.
And she's better. Like, stop saying that. And then it's like, If I Fell, which is an interesting song because I think it's on the 8th bar. It does a key change. So I'm listening. It's like, and I go, key change. She's like, stop saying things like that.
Sean talks.
It may have been the 11th bar, but it's early on.
If that doesn't get you to watch the film, nothing will.
Yeah, that's
right there.
All right.
Sometimes I just look at the equipment, Sometimes.
Yeah. Let's get to John. John did a bunch of notes. I guess he's got the Criterion collection. So we're going to get some nerdy insight here, which is great. I watched the documentary on the movie. Look, I will tell you, this is one of these movies that I always say, if it comes on, I always watch it. And there's a lot of reasons why, but Ebert said it was one of the 5 best musicals ever made, and he put it up with Singing in the Rain. That's how much he liked this movie. I'm not even going to talk about the stuff that Lester did. He won an award. MTV gave him a diploma for being the father of MTV. And he said he wants to get his blood checked because he didn't buy that. But if you looked at the stuff he did, originally, you're making it sound like the only reason why the movie got made was to sell records. That is true. United Artists wanted to sell a soundtrack, so they gave Lester complete autonomy to make whatever he wanted to. They wanted songs, so they went to the Beatles. They went to John and Paul and said, "Look, you got to write 8 songs for the soundtrack." So they wrote songs. Now you think about band musicals up to that point, and it was really the bands would be in the background. In fact, the Beatles got offered a couple of movies where they would be the band in the background, and they turned those down. They didn't want that. So this was so different the way the personalities were featured. But if you look at the songs they wrote, right, in any musical, a couple songs stand out. Well, every song on this soundtrack a hit. Can't Buy Me Love. I Should Have Known Better. I Love Her. They cut out You Can't Do That. So they filmed it. And then Hard Day's Night, the title came from something Ringo used to say because they didn't have a title for the movie. They filmed the movie. They didn't have a title for the movie. And they're like, what should we call it? And John Lennon was talking to the producer saying, Ringo has this saying when we're in the studio all day, the next day he says, boy, that was a hard day's night. And they're all like, hey, that's kind of a good name. So then the producer says, can you write a song for it? They're like, a song? Well, what would it be about? He goes, I don't know. You're the songwriter. Next morning, 8:00, they have the song A Hard Day's Night with that chord. But they filmed everything. So all they did was they took it on the opening credits and played the song. Now, you think about that. That's 8 hits in one movie. So for me, it's like the music itself is unbelievable. But the other thing is, and this is something I really didn't know, the timing of everything, right? George, Paul, and John formed a band in 58, okay? They were the Quarrymen and a bunch of other names. Ringo came along, I think, in 61 after they got rid of Pete Best. So Love Me Do came out in 61 or 62. And it was a big hit, right? So they weren't unknown in the U.S. They were known well enough to go on Ed Sullivan, right? So it wasn't like out of left field they came and all of a sudden they're on Ed Sullivan. They were popular. The timing of this was all serendipity because they started production in December, talking about production. They hadn't filmed anything yet. And they said to John, okay, what's your schedule like? Well, we're going to the Bahamas in January. We're going to shoot Ed Sullivan in February. He goes, all right, go to the Bahamas and write the music. That's where they wrote the songs. Then they go on Ed Sullivan and they completely explode, right? So now they've got this movie that comes out in July. So as big as they were, they just completely exploded across the world. And now people who saw them in concerts now saw their personalities. And to Mike's point, obviously they're exaggerated personalities, but that is what their personalities were. They just exaggerated them. In fact, the movie was called An Exaggerated Day in the Life. There really wasn't a plot other than that. But when I look at this movie, I look at 4 young guys that are on the cusp of something gigantic. And that's what this movie was to me. It's like, think of what's out there in the future for these guys. And this movie was the thing that started it out. And they were really good in it. They weren't a typical band doing a movie or actors
playing a band. These were musicians who could act. They were funny. John Lennon was funny in this movie. And the brilliant thing about the script that was nominated for an Oscar, it's made to sound ad-libbed. And they said there was about 12 ad-libbed lines in the entire movie, and it was John Lennon. He did all the ad-libs. Everything else was scripted to sound ad-libbed. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? And that's why, you guys say there was no plot. I kind of get that. There was. It was just a day in the life of these guys, because the writer who was with them for a couple of days said this is exactly what it was like with these guys. And actually, as the shoot started to end, they started to get a little bitter about the fact that they really didn't have any life, because they couldn't go anywhere because all the screaming teenagers. But to me, this was just seeing these guys so young. It's like when we talked about 48 Hours. You're looking at Eddie Murphy, right? In that one scene, you're thinking, think of the career this guy's got ahead of him. These guys changed music. I mean, prior to that, Elvis Presley was the biggest thing in the world. Epstein said to them, their manager, these guys are going to be bigger than Elvis. And they're thinking, that would be like somebody saying today, you're going to be bigger than the Beatles, right? It just seems like it can't happen. This movie wasn't the start of it, but it was the extension of the Ed Sullivan broadcast, and people got to know these Beatles much more than they got to know musicians in the past. But again, the music alone is unbelievable.
But let's get back to the experience of the film for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Because as I'm watching the film, this is the first time I've seen this film. I can't help
Really?
think
It was
about.
the first time you've seen it?
I might have seen it a long time ago, but I don't remember it. This is the first time I actually sat and watched. I stayed up through the whole thing too, which is amazing.
Yeah, he doesn't usually do that.
I'm looking at it through what happened to them.
Yeah.
And the bittersweet nature of what I'm watching, which is these four innocent guys. And they weren't that innocent.
John wasn't
success.
innocent.
They kind of knew, you could tell that they were kind of, there was not 100% innocence. But I'm looking at it through the eyes of, John Lennon got killed and where everybody ended up, George Harrison. And it's very bittersweet. It's like kind of sad in a way that, it just brought that up for me, that these guys started off so young and fresh. And, history does everything to what are you going to do? But, for me, technically, the film, I was totally captivated by what he was doing in the frame, especially in the studio, when he's shooting the cameras and he's shooting the little monitors as different heads are in there and stuff. And the hell, you talk about that helicopter thing over the field. I mean, I thought, it was shaky, but it was super cool. And I just love the look.
Well, the cinematographer, they interviewed the cinematographer, and there was a script, but it wasn't a shooting script. So he couldn't really figure out what they were going to do. That helicopter, it's not like they rented the helicopter for a day. They went out to shoot the outdoor scenes. The helicopter was there. Yeah. So Lester said, you think we could use that helicopter? Yeah. Now the cinematographer's got to set up shots for something that wasn't planned. And the shots were incredible.
Well, they're iconic now because everybody uses them. Same.
Right. So, and then the lens flare, when he shot directly into the light, at one point, the camera goes around Paul McCartney.
I know the shot you're talking about. They're shooting through the drum set.
It's a great no, not that.
Well, there's another one there.
So what they did was the studio wasn't big enough, and they couldn't get a crane to go around him. So they bought a baby swing, put the camera on the swing, and went around him. And as they went around him, the camera looks directly into this big arc light, which was kind of a mistake. So the producers back in the States said, "Did you see the mistake? I mean, the camera was right in the light." And the producer said, "Yeah, that took us half a day to get that shot."
So that was not done at the time. Though really the guy who really broke that with lens flare was Conrad Hall in Cool Hand Luke, because he used it a lot there.
And now
but it was here. It was here first, Right.
But that scene, he also used 6 cameras. Yeah. They used 6 cameras in that. In fact, he said, so they didn't have direct communication with all the cameramen like they do now, and they didn't have they couldn't watch it back. So he let the cameraman just go out there. That's why there's a lot of close-ups, a lot of on the guitar hands, right? They never used to shoot that before. Well, he said one cameraman, the shots were so bad, he didn't use any footage from one camera, because every time something interesting was about to be filmed, he would pull away the camera. So that alone is very unique. Usually it's a static shot facing the stage. That's how that stuff was shot before. So from a filmmaking standpoint, Lester was great. And the reason why he got picked, by the way, the Beatles had the choice of who they wanted, and because he was there's a show called The Goon Show, which starred Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan. He was a director on those shows, and they were a huge Peter Sellers fan, and that's how Lester got in there, and they loved Lester. They thought he was great, and he was. It was amazing.
So why'd they
Technically, it was
stick that?
amazing.
Explain the
Mike,
grandfather.
Get frustrated like I did.
The clean guy.
One thing they didn't know how to shoot about guitar players is whenever they were shooting like a solo, nowadays you always shoot the hand that's fretting.
Right.
They would always go to the strumming hand. It's like,
Right.
I want to see where he's playing that on the neck, you know?
Well, the other thing was the grandfather, right? And we talked about this last night on our show. Everyone kept saying, he's very clean. He's very clean.
What
that was
show
the
is
big
that?
joke.
What show?
Okay, so his name's Wilfred Bramble, and he was on a show called Steptoe and Son, which is the American version of Sanford and Son. So instead of calling him a dirty man, and he, in a junkyard, he was clean. He was actually
They beat that joke to death.
but
actually.
because he was the most well-known actor out of anyone
I
in
know.
that movie, other than the Beatles.
I know.
But
And he was
you
sort
know,
of the center of the whole thing because it all revolved around
he was
him.
funny. He's a
He's
mixer.
the one that sent Ringo off.
That's
going
right.
Half cocked.
With that you got that big hooter. That big hooter. That the head must carry that weight.
So, but as a film,
trembling under the weight of that scooter.
I thought for another thing too, not to be, complaining about the film, but that they were kind of mean.
Who was kind of mean?
Just about everybody that
well, they all picked on Ringo. Everybody picked on
the
Ringo.
old man.
No, like the guy in the car, the railroad.
Yeah,
car.
well, they were supposed to be like
that was generational.
the
thing,
new
huh?
generation, right?
Yeah, us versus them.
Now I don't like it.
I want you to know I fought the war for you. I bet you're sorry you won.
See, I think that's actually a really important part of the movie. That like in 1963, the 60s aren't really happening yet. The 60s
Right.
are still the 50s.
Right.
And I try to imagine this movie was this huge change, that it signaled something new, and that this was one of the first things that made an era different. There was a generation that had fought the war, like they say in the movie, and then there were these kids that were really different. And it's like, a revolution is the goal of a revolution is to change something so that it changes forever. That's absolutely what this movie did. It's part of what made the 60s the 60s. As I know this because I studied it in my middle school history class, the 60s. And
yeah, you're such a jerk.
but yeah, I mean, it's an important movie. It's just an important movie.
I couldn't get over the fact that their hair was a big deal. That woman even says, "I can't. The hair is so long." I mean, that hair was a big deal. It was
Right, because everything in this movie is we're used to. Everything in this movie is how people engage with bands that they like.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite scene, frankly, was when George goes into that, where the guy's interviewing him. I guess he's like he has models or something. I forget what he was doing.
Yeah.
Like an
I mean, that was almost like social
Yeah,
media where
that's
they're
right.
trying to figure out her influence. They had an influencer, and George is making fun of those shirts, which I guess were from some other band or something. I forget. There was an inside joke.
She's
about
a
him
drag. We
I
turn
don't
off
like
the
these.
volume when she's on the TV.
I like that scene, and that played pretty
Okay.
current.
By
I
the
mean,
way,
it
that
seemed-
scene was added because George went up to the writer and said, "You don't think very much of me, do you?" He goes, "Why?" Because you have written nothing for me. And he wrote that scene for him, and he was really good in it too.
Well, he married the young girl. He married
the
the
guy
girl
who plays the
Let's not
fashion
forget
guy.
Patty Boyd, who's all over
Oh,
that.
Yeah, well, that's his future wife. The guy who played the fashion guy was on Broadway in Caligula, very serious actor
Nice.
who played that role. So
You say that like it's a bad thing.
no, I'm saying the fact that he would do this movie and play that type of role after doing that on Broadway.
Mike, you're so quiet over there.
Not
Tell us something. Give us some movie thoughts.
Movie thoughts.
Well, this movie, I mean.
One thing Sean brought up about being a musician and how they would shoot musicians back then. They edited this so that what you were hearing on the soundtrack, what chords were being played, was being shown on the screen at the right time. That was pretty unheard of. Usually those kind of editing decisions are left to somebody that has no clue or cares about what is actually happening on the screen. And that was pretty interesting to me that they would go for that in what you call a low budget exploitation movie to try to make money on the phenomenon of the Beatles. They put a lot of care into it, and a lot of musicians obviously, like Sean himself probably would be like, this is amazing. These guys are great. This is what I want to do. And I know what chord he's playing right now. And it's fun.
Not only what chord, but what position on the neck, because anyone who plays the guitar knows you can play chords all over the place. So it was really cool to see when they would switch to a bar chord or this or that, you know, and you really got the voice, you got to understand the voicings of the song that way.
So was that a learning tool for you guys?
It is, because you obsess over which formation of the chord they were playing. John Lennon has a very weird thing where he plays the D chord in the what they call cowboy chords in the first 3 frets, but then he adds his pinky over into the 4th string on the 4th fret, and nobody else does that. But you can't play a Beatles song and make it sound right unless you add that extra pinky onto the 4th string of your D chord, if you want to have the right sound.
Yeah.
Just a little. Isn't it true that some of the musicians went over to Liverpool to try and teach them how to do some blues because they wanted to play the blues so bad? And who was it that said it?
No, I think this was a guy who went to London, an American blues musician, and he said those English boys, they want to play the blues so bad, and that's how they play it. So bad, you know. So
because they are so different. The Beatles had a different beat. They just sounded different from blues, or you know, they expounded on us. You know, I mean, not us, but U.S.
Now, as a musical, I really enjoyed this film. As a musical,
yeah.
I like the way the numbers just came out of nowhere, and you know, you're seeing them play it, which is, you know, I'm not a musician, but I appreciated what was going on. I loved watching Ringo on the drums, you know, a little inspiration there.
Because you're learning the drums, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm trying. And this showed me it's, you know, he's doing it. It's pretty good. I have a little aside, you know, Lorne Michaels, Saturday Night Live, will not shoot people playing the instruments. I read somewhere in a book that he has a rule that I don't want to see any of that instrument work. Stay on their faces, stay on the personalities. If you notice that show, they'll never go into a close-up of somebody strutting a guitar or anything.
Why is that, Ralph?
I think he just decided, he said it's about the musicians, not about, you know, the technical stuff they're doing. So just a little
That's
aside.
like if you saw that Madonna
musician,
that came out in the 90s, she put that on one of her tours. They never showed the musicians. They were like, even when they were on stage, she had like a curtain, like a silk or something. You could see them behind it.
Just a weird thing that I read somewhere, and I thought,
you know, but
given what you're saying, which is you guys were studying the film to see how they played. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Sometimes I just watch the guitars. I tell you what, I really want Lennon's Rickenbacker, that model. Rickenbacker. Well, we were watching Echo in the Canyon. They had a big debate whether that was Rickenbacker or Rickenbacker.
Also,
I always thought it was
we
Bacher.
watched A Hard Day's Night, we flipped over to watch Echoes in the Canyon. Have you seen that, Mike?
Yeah.
It just,
I've heard about that. I've heard that.
It is just such a great film to see the progression when the Beatles came to Los Angeles and how they incorporate, and especially what's his name?
Come on.
Roger McGuinn?
No. John Lennon. Paul
the
McCartney.
Great guitar player of all time.
Eric Clapton.
Eric. Yeah, he was there, and he admits, you know, how everybody steals from everybody. You know what I mean?
There are only 12 notes.
There's only 12 notes. So it adapts its way into, you know, the culture, a new wave, and, you know,
everybody influences everyone.
And he was right. And we watched it for the second time, this film. And it's interesting that Eric Clapton right there, he says, "Oh, I guess I copped that." And Jacob Dylan says, "Oh, we can edit that out." And then he says, "Oh no, keep it in," because he's not ashamed. You know, this is how music is formed, you know, from that time when the Beatles came to be with the Byrds, and you know, that's the evolution of rock and roll.
I'm looking at the film. I'm looking at how innocent these guys are, and you know, about 3 years later, they're wearing the long hair, and like how much change happens within those 3 years. And what I recognize in this is that
and this can't be faked, is there is a genuine affection between these guys. They are in it together. And that's what's so great about this movie. You know, and they were you can tell that they were less engaged with Help. But in some ways, I like Help. Help is definitely more plotted than this film. And I like the music in Help better. And I think some of the musical sequences are better music, you know, better music videos, you know, but you know, they were less engaged, but they were still engaged with each other. You can always tell that they were like looking at each other, you know, and that they were playing off each other.
Well, they looked like they were having fun in this movie. I mean,
yeah.
They did.
Everybody looked like they were having fun. That's what I like about it too.
And I
Mike,
think that's what everyone wanted to believe too. I think anyone who watched this movie, you know, anyone who was a fan, was like, you know, we love these guys. They must love each other. And this, I think this movie showed that.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I was talking about fans. I was thinking about what you said earlier. See, this is a movie I enjoy thinking about more than watching because there's so much going on in the movie. And you mentioned it as an exploitation film, which I think is actually really interesting because there is a monster that must have been very different for people watching this movie. I mean, the fact that they didn't have to recruit a whole bunch of young women to run after these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, sure, the Beatles fans know this. There's a picture of these young women clinging to a fence, screaming at RFK for a concert. Mm-hmm. One of those women, that's my wife's childhood friend's mother. She actually lives up the street.
Nice.
And that is like, I mean, there's music that I love. There's musicians that I love. There've been people that I've had the opportunity to say thank you. But I mean, I've never chased anybody down. I've never done anything like that. And that must have been, I mean, you talk about these guys are in it together. That's part of, to me, what they were in together. That's part of this overwhelming world. I mean, the whole idea of a celebrity, I mean, like Lindbergh was a celebrity before anybody, but this is like the sort of modern version of a celebrity where your life is ultimately not your own. That's the roots of all of that are in this movie. And it's really interesting because it is kind of a monster that they are going to have to deal with because of their success. It's not the same as before. Like people want to know everybody's business, but this, I mean, people actually ran you down. Watching these young women in the audience screaming their names and crying and that level of devotion, and it must have been both gratifying and also pretty
Imagine
scary,
the reaction when they hear a rumor that Paul McCartney is dead. These fans, okay,
right, and
what that meant and what that meant to all these people. I mean, the phenomenon of these guys can't be overstated. You just can't. I mean, everybody knows this, so I don't want to. But I look at it. I'm telling you, I look at it, and I'm kind of sad, knowing what happens down the road. But I also went to a Paul McCartney and Wings concert at FedEx Field, probably 15 years ago, and the ages of that place, you know, went all the way from 12 years up to 78 years old. And everybody, when the Beatles song started playing, everybody's up dancing around. It's an amazing thing. And that's what that movie yesterday really tapped into.
There's a handful of musical artists that you're going to be singing their songs in 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years, right? The Beatles is one of them. Elvis is one of them. A lot of the stuff you hear today, 20 years, you're never going to hear about it. So it does resonate. Now, I want to give you one more little tidbit. This is the American distributor. When they saw the first cut of the movie, their suggestion to Lester was they wanted to dub the voices of the four guys.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Because you couldn't understand their British.
Midwestern. They wanted it Midwestern.
Okay.
Oh my God. That would have really made it horrible.
Can you imagine giving him that note? And by the way, Phil Collins was an extra in the concert scene at the end. He's the one who narrates the Criterion documentary, and there's a little still of him in the crowd.
Oh, they actually show it.
And they were all none of them got paid. They were all just Beatle fans. They basically did a Beatles concert in that hall. That's exactly what they did.
Is Ringo actually a photographer? Do you guys know if he's
very good?
He's released a couple books of photography.
Yeah,
interesting.
He is very good.
Yep,
interesting. Drew, you were going to say something.
Oh.
I was just going to ask John, does he really think that Elvis Costello has got that kind of lasting power?
You know, Drew,
when you start
mixing Elvis Presley with Elvis Costello, you lose all credibility.
Keep poking that bear.
Okay?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Elvis
Mike's
Stoico.
smiling.
Sorry,
I know Mike is an Elvis Costello fan.
Well, so am I, but don't compare him to Elvis Presley. Okay?
Listen, Elvis Presley did something that I hope to do one day, which is a very considerate thing to do for your family, and also
You're
a
going to say
memorable thing to
something
do.
ugly
do.
right
Here it
now.
comes.
I know
Which
you
is to
are.
die. Wojo's got to die on the toilet is so thoughtful. It's thoughtful,
Oh,
and
good.
I admire
Oh,
that.
good.
man.
Let's
Oh.
start.
Okay,
admire
so
it.
I think he's
we're
gonna
gonna
cross
break this
over.
and move
Not
on.
once, but twice I've been to Graceland. Never got to sit on the toilet.
Oh man,
You
that
can
is my
talk
favorite
about
Paul
my
Simon
mother.
song.
Do not talk about Elvis.
I'm just trying to figure out which
Let's
Elvis you're
compare this
talking
to an
about.
Elvis
God.
movie.
My God.
I mean,
All right, so
think we're
okay,
done.
I think
Elvis
By the way,
Costello
the
is a great
Beatles were
musician.
huge Elvis fans. Huge
Yeah, of
Elvis
course.
fans.
And
Lou
Elvis
Costello was a
didn't care
great
about that.
comedian.
I think we know the ratings on this. We kind of get a feeling, but let's just go around and just get it again. Drew,
It's a great film that I don't need to watch again, personally, but it's a great
Okay,
film.
I respect that.
Rojo.
I'm kind of in the same bucket. I mean,
Yeah,
I would
same.
watch it again, but
I wouldn't.
you know,
I mean, I don't need to.
but I don't need to.
The rest, I mean, I'm gonna say Yippee-Ki-Yay. I don't think I need to watch it again, although I might, just because some of the technical stuff in there is pretty cool.
I'll just throw
I
other
think-
CDs on.
It does make me want to go watch Help, to be honest. I might check that one out.
Makes me want to
Anyway.
watch Yesterday.
Yippee-ki-yay, yay, yay.
Yeah, okay. I love Yesterday. Sean and
Yesterday's a good
Debbie.
movie. Yeah.
all right, Yippee-Ki-Yay. What about
Well, to the Beatles, Yippee-Ki-Yay, yay, yay. To the movie, yay, yay.
That's symmetrical. All right.
Mike,
Yippee-ki.
Mike, we rate
Mike, our
Yippee-Ki-Yay and
guest.
Yippee-Ki-Nay.
Yeah, it's I'll go back and revisit it again in another couple of years for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And every time it comes on, I watch it. Every
Yeah.
time.
Mike, I
When
brought
does
you
it come
because
on?
I was
It's on
afraid some
TCM
people
all the
wouldn't
time.
like it, so I
Oh,
wanted
okay.
someone to tilt the balance in favor of the movie.
I
No,
got
that's, I mean, it's really created their iconic look too. Those shots they do at the end where you're
Yeah.
seeing from the eyebrows up and
Yeah.
all that. And even that scene where George gets his picture taken and they do the
That
strips.
photographer, they hired the photographer to take stills, and based on what he did, they let him do the movie poster. So the movie
Yeah.
poster was his design.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the tailor was their tailor. Just
The
so you
tailor
know.
was there, and they did about 30 takes of that. And John
that
said
was
a
all
different
ad lib
line
by
every
John
time.
Lennon.
I do want
I
to say
thought
one
John
thing.
Lennon came off pretty good in this film. I thought he you know.
I
anyway.
think they all came off.
I
pretty
didn't
good,
realize
actually.
that they were written ad libs, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Can I tell
wanted
you
to say that-
my
I'm sorry,
three
go ahead,
degrees
Mike.
of separation from somebody in the movie?
Of course.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, I used to go to a lot of Beatles Fest fan conventions in New York, and they had a special guest, Victor Spinetti, who
Oh.
played the
director.
or the TV director in Hard Day's Night, and was actually in Help and Magical Mystery Tour as well. Anyway, he was a guest at the convention, and I was having my Super 8 sound camera around, and I asked him if he would film a special scene for me, and if he would recreate a line he did in the movie Help. And so he took the microphone and he looked directly into my Super 8 camera and said, "With this microphone, I could, dare I say it, rule the world." Watch out, you'll see that scene.
Mike,
You have that? You have that footage still?
I do. I'm just transferring it now into.
Oh, that's awesome. He was funny. When they interviewed him, he said Lester would rehearse the scene and film it and not tell him. So like at one point, George Harrison knocks over an amp by mistake. They just kept it in. That opening scene when he fell, that wasn't planned. They just kept it going.
Is he
So
the
it
director
was
with the sweater? Is that the guy with the
Yeah.
sweater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got awards on my wall in the office.
He kept
But
saying, when
he-
you're over 30, you don't understand what's going
He
on.
was in the
This guy-
producers. Wasn't he in the producers? Was that Spinetti? No,
No.
it wasn't.
And you have that. You're going to transfer that digitally, huh? Get that
I
on
am.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd love to
preserve
see that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll let you
God,
know.
those old Super 8 sound cameras.
Yeah.
All right.
We're
Well,
gonna
that
do a
was
show
a good
about that.
run there.
Yeah.
Nice movie
Yeah.
for some of us. Most of us.
We
We don't need to spin the wheel this time. Debbie is the
No,
last
I think
person
we should
standing.
spin the wheel. I think
Nope.
Debbie should get.
Don't need
her
to.
Picture.
Debbie's got it.
That's you know
Have
what.
you
That's
picked a movie, Debbie?
She gets dizzy if you spin her too hard.
Debbie. I don't agree with that. Okay, I think you should get the
Fire
wheel
Girl
and see your
2,
picture.
Electric Boogaloo.
You got a couple days.
What did I finally say?
What are you going to check with your agent first?
Yeah, well, it was gonna be one, but then I changed it.
It was going to be Working Girl, but then you changed.
In
Oh,
fact,
Working Girl's a good
in my
movie.
mind, it's going to be Once Upon a Time
In Hollywood.
in Hollywood.
Oh, Whoa, I just watched that. I don't have to watch it.
The Tarantino
I've
film.
not seen
Oh no,
that.
your assignment is to watch it. You got to watch it.
I've
The
seen it like
Tarantino
10
film.
times already.
You seen it 10 times?
Yeah.
Keep asking,
Oh
Ralph.
my gosh.
Is
I
that the
love it.
one?
I love that movie.
I mean, okay, that just came out.
The
didn't
day
it?
my wife picks a Tarantino movie,
Yeah, I can't believe that.
I can't
Yeah,
believe it
can
either.
be-
Debbie, the only downside of that is I got to listen to Ralph slobber all over Brad Pitt when he takes his freaking shirt off on top of the roof.
You see his
look at
arms
him,
in that
look at him.
film?
Oh, look at his
You see
arms.
his-
Oh
look
my
at
Kevin
God.
Costner.
When he's driving that car, look at his forearms when he's driving
Oh
that
my
car. He has to really
God.
turn that steering wheel.
Oh my God. I'm not going to be able to deal with that, but good
Okay.
call.
So bye.
Whoa! All right, everybody. I guess Wojo has
Any
a phone
final
now.
words, Mike?
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed the discussion, and you guys are all right.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Again,
Mike,
Mike.
are we all right enough for you
Thank
to
you,
I
Mike.
subscribe?
didn't
to?
embarrass you with my story, did
No,
I?
I was just going to say,
Subscribe,
Mike,
share.
thanks for saving Sean. That really,
Yes.
Yeah.
we're all deep. We're all richer because of that.
Yeah, and
So-
our 12 viewers will thank you too.
Oh, also, too, I want to say Mike has influenced me and Debbie in another way.
Oh my.
Oh,
goodness.
yeah.
Oh,
What is
Mike
it? The,
used to have these amazing
the
pool
waterbed? What?
And afterwards, he had his band equipment set up in the basement, and everybody would go in the basement and play, you know,
And jam?
and jam. And Debbie and I have had a couple hootenannies like that. So we're waiting for COVID to lift.
Let's see. You don't
It's
get the word hootenanny. You don't hear that word often. Okay. So
Yeah.
you're really getting something here.
we hoot and we nanny.
Hoot
But
nanny.
Mike, we really totally enjoy your podcasts when you do your show.
Your live shows.
Your
with-
live
on
show.
Zoom.
Those are, oh man, you
Yeah.
guys got to see it. It's awesome.
What is it? What is it? Tell
Yeah,
us what it
please
is.
plug.
Yeah, let's
Plug.
push your podcast.
Well, it's just my wife and I both perform, and we've done a couple of Facebook Live concerts over
That's a
the
long podcast name.
pandemic. And if you go to the Lanes on Facebook, you could find them and watch them at your leisure.
Nice.
I like it.
A very eclectic hit collection of
Check it out.
I hate to say it, but can you do "Come On Down to My Boat, Baby"?
he did that on a previous.
Come on down to my boat, baby.
Come
Oh,
on
man.
down, we'll
Oh, she-
sail
She was
away.
talking to Mike, John.
Yeah, John.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I love that music, man. Yeah, that's my
You
bread
did
is
that
butter.
at one of your concerts.
Oh,
You did a cover of that song.
Yes, he
I'm telling
did.
you.
He once called me on stage to play the tambourine and green tambourine.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Max is on Broadway.
All
We gotta
right,
get all
producer,
together.
Mr.
We
Producer
gotta
Man.
get together and
Let's
do.
wrap this up.
Guys, Ralph is studying drums. So is Michelle or Wojo.
I'm leaning way
And
back.
Tom-
I'm leaning back.
John is learning how to play the guitar, and Drew, you
Banjo. You play the banjo, don't you?
Well, I own one. I don't think anyone wants to hear what it sounds
I
like.
own
yet.
one.
all you need.
No.
And
One day.
Brad advertised himself as a moderate guitar player.
So
I
we
think-
should come and jam.
Okay.
Amateur.
All
I thought you were
guitar.
moderate.
right.
Yeah, Ralph,
Let's
this is
say
Diana.
goodbye,
I don't think I've ever
Okay.
used my
Let's go.
that word.
Ralph,
It's been a
Wojo
long
does
day's
his
night.
Facebook
This
profile
has
while
been a
we're
hard
talking. So
day's
can we move on,
podcast.
please?
Definitely a
Yeah,
hard
hell.
day's podcast.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody have a good week.
Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank
Great
you,
week
Mike.
to everybody.
Hey,
Next
Mike,
week,
thanks,
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Hey,
buy me love.
The Tarantino film, right?
I'll buy you a diamond.
Yeah, Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Feel all right.
All right, everybody. Good night.
Anything, my friend.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.